For decades, Pastor Pat Robertson was one of the most recognizable and controversial figures in American religion and politics. From the pulpit to television screens, his voice reached millions through the 700 Club, a program that shaped the way generations viewed faith, morality, and power. But behind the confident preacher's smile and calm Southern drawl lay a story far more complex than the public ever knew. Born Marion Gordon Robertson in 1930, he built an empire that blurred the line between ministry and media. Yet as the years went on, questions grew louder about his influence, his wealth, and the forces that shaped his rise. The man who claimed to speak for God also held secrets that would make even his most loyal followers question everything they thought they knew about him. While many believed Robertson's journey was one of humble beginnings, the truth is that he came from power and privilege. His father, Absalom Willis Robertson, was a U.S. Senator from Virginia, giving young Pat access to the corridors of political influence long before he ever set foot in a pulpit. Her early years were marked by ambition, not piety. He studied law at Yale, served briefly in the Marines, and pursued a life that had little to do with preaching. It wasn't until the 1950s, after what he called a divine encounter, that he claimed to have found his calling. But even that moment, some biographers say, was more calculated than inspired. A pivot from politics to pulpit, carefully designed to merge both worlds. The future televangelist was learning how to blend faith with power and money with ministry. In 1960, Pat Robertson founded the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, in a tiny Virginia station bought with what he said were divine donations. It was the beginning of something monumental, a religious media powerhouse that would eventually reach over 170 countries. The 700 Club became his signature show, offering prayer, prophecy, and political commentary all under the banner of Christianity. But what few realized was how skillfully Robertson used the show to build influence far beyond religion. His broadcasts often mixed sermons with conservative ideology, shaping political conversations across America. Critics accused him of manipulating faith for power, while supporters saw him as a messenger of truth. The empire grew richer by the year, and so did Robertson's reach. But as the empire expanded, so did the controversies. Pat Robertson often claimed to receive divine messages, prophecies about elections, wars, and natural disasters. Some came true, many did not. He once predicted that the world would end in 1982, that George W. Bush would win re-election by God's hand, and that hurricanes and plagues were signs of divine punishment. For his followers, these pronouncements were thrilling. For critics, they were troubling examples of how easily faith could be used to control fear. Political analysts noted how Robertson's predictions conveniently aligned with his conservative agendas, often steering his viewers towards specific causes or candidates. It became increasingly difficult to separate what was spiritual guidance from what was political strategy. The man who once claimed to serve the kingdom of heaven had become a kingmaker on earth. By the 1980s and 1990s, Robertson was no longer just a preacher, he was a global brand. His organization had millions in assets, including universities, humanitarian networks, and even diamond mining ventures overseas. But with success came scrutiny. Investigations into CBN's finances raised questions about how donations were used and whether charitable funds were being redirected to pro-profit enterprises. Robertson's political advocacy also intensified. He founded the Christian Coalition, which became a powerful force in shaping U.S. elections. Critics accused him of exploiting faith for power, while former employees claimed they were pressured to conform to his political ideology or lose their jobs. The image of a humble servant of God was fading, replaced by a businessman and strategist whose real motivations were increasingly unclear. Over the years, Robertson's statements often sparked outrage. He made headlines for controversial remarks about natural disasters being divine punishment, about world leaders being cursed, and about social issues that divided his audience. Yet behind the sensational headlines, whispers about a more private darkness, power struggles within CBN and tensions with family members over succession. His financial dealings in Africa, particularly in diamond ventures in Liberia, also drew criticism. Reports suggested ties to questionable business practices that conflicted with his religious image. Robertson never faced legal consequences, but the accusations lingered. To his supporters, he was persecuted by the media. To his detractors, he was a man hiding behind Scripture to protect an empire. In 1988, Robertson shocked the world by announcing his campaign for President of the United States. It was a bold move that blurred the last remaining line between faith and politics. For a time, he gained traction, rallying evangelical voters with fiery speeches and promises to restore America's Christian values. But soon the cracks began to show. His lack of political experience, combined with mounting scrutiny over his finances and statements, doomed his campaign. Though he didn't win, the attempt was far from a failure. It launched a movement. The Christian right, inspired by Robertson's campaign, became a dominant force in American politics for decades. In that sense, Pat Robertson didn't need to win the presidency. He helped reshape it from the outside. Behind the scenes, Pat Robertson's personal life was far from the peaceful image he projected. His long marriage to Dee Dee Robertson, who passed away in 2022, was marked by distance caused by his nonstop work in public life. His 4 children often described growing up in the shadow of a man who was both deeply devoted and emotionally unavailable. When Pat began grooming his son Gordon to take over CBN, tensions reportedly grew within the family. The weight of legacy, power, and expectation took its toll. Insiders described the transition as uneasy, with whispered disagreements over direction and image. In his later years, as his health declined, Robertson's family struggled to balance their love for him with the immense shadow of his empire. Even after stepping down from the 700 Club, Robertson's influence lingered. He remained the face of conservative Christian television, a symbol of faith to some and manipulation to others. CBN continued broadcasting his messages, rerunning decades of episodes and using his teachings as the foundation of its brand. But younger audiences began to question his relevance and message. In an age of digital transparency, old comments resurfaced, statements that seemed out of touch or offensive by modern standards. The network struggled to balance honoring its founder with evolving to meet a new generation of believers. Robertson's legacy, once towering, now faced the same test every empire eventually does: whether it could survive without its creator. In his final years, Robertson appeared frail but defiant. Even as health challenges mounted, he continued to make occasional public appearances, often reflecting on his long journey with both pride and pain. In June 2023, he passed away at the age of 93. Tributes poured in from political leaders, religious figures, and millions of fans around the world. Yet, alongside the praise came reflection on the controversies, the contradictions, and the complicated legacy he left behind. He changed the way religion and politics intersect in America, one commenter said. But as many pointed out, that influence came with consequences that would be debated for generations. Even after his passing, many mysteries remain. How much of Robertson's vast wealth came from true ministry and how much from business ventures? What motivated his most extreme statements? Faith, conviction, or strategy? And why did so many who worked closely with him eventually walk away disillusioned? For every person who saw him as a prophet, another saw him as a politician in disguise. His life forces an uncomfortable question about modern faith. When does spreading the gospel cross into controlling it? As the truth continues to emerge, it becomes clear that the story of Pat Robertson is not just about one man. It's about the power of belief and how easily it can be shaped by ambition. Pat Robertson's story is one of brilliance, contradiction, and consequence. He built an empire from faith and turned it into one of the most influential religious movements in modern history. Yet that same power exposed the fragile boundary between divine mission and human desire. For millions, he was a spiritual guide who gave them hope and purpose. For others, he was a warning of what happens when religion and politics intertwine too closely. In the end, Pat Robertson's life reminds us that light and shadow often coexist, that even those who speak in the name of God can leave behind legacies that inspire and unsettle in equal measure. Whether one views him as a hero or a cautionary tale, one truth remains undeniable. Pat Robertson changed America forever, and the full cost of that change is still being revealed.